If you brought a Bible with you today, just turn to the book of Matthew. It's in the New Testament. It's the first book in the New Testament. Get the Old Testament, then the New. Use your table of contents, or if you find Matthew or Mark, Luke, and John, you've got a little too far, but find that. We'll be in chapter 22 today, and or if you have an app or anything, you're welcome to. We'll put it on the screens as well in a moment. Today I'm going to begin with a tip and a trick. I get targeted advertisements, emails all the time, and I bet many of you do as well, and they all promise something similar in different ways. They promise that I can get more results with less work. If you've heard the phrase, the 4-hour work week, that we only got to work 4 hours if we do it like this, and doesn't that sound great? I'm going to work 4 hours a week. Or this is one that I took personal offense to. I hope that this is just everyone gets this ad when they're on Instagram, but I get an ad that says this: Are you a dad over 40 who needs to lose some weight? Click this link for this exercise plan. Does everybody get that? Just the dad? No, just me. I'm the only person who gets that. That is a true ad that I get. But it's a shortcut, right? It's like, oh no, you don't have to work out like that. It's only 10 minutes a day, and it's this. And there's a loophole or a hack, right? You've seen maybe on TikTok or something, people go into Chipotle and try to get like 4 months worth of food into one bowl, if you've seen that. And it's, if you order it like this, you get so much rice and beans, and the employee will absolutely hate you, but it'll only cost you $9. And there's hacks and shortcuts. So I'm going to give you one today, okay? Maybe I'll give you two. I forgot about the first one. I used to find ways to get something for nothing or something for less. And I don't really do this anymore. It's kind of weird, but there's no reason not to. Every item in your house, food item, drink, whatever, has a number on the back that says call with questions or comments, concerns, right? And every now and then you get a bag of chips that's stale, and maybe you call that number and you complain, and maybe they'll send you something. A while ago, I realized it doesn't say just call when you have problems. It says call with comments. So I just would start calling, and I would just ask for things. And most of the time, they would just send me food. They'd send you coupons and send you things. So your first tip and trick for a shortcut, a hack, a workaround to beat the system is just ask for stuff. Just go do it. You don't have to wait. You can just ask for free things, and a lot of them will give them to you. Number two is another real one. I learned this one from Starbucks. This is a more detailed hack, so if you want to take notes, you can. I used to work out of Starbucks quite frequently. It's a great place to work, and you could sit and not be bothered. And well, they did a thing. If you had a registered gift card, you get free refills on coffee or tea. And I couldn't drink coffee all day, and so I'd order black tea. And at first I thought, well, with free refills, that's wonderful. I'll get, I would get like the smallest cup, and I would just get 80 refills a day, and it would just be fresh and it'd be wonderful. But then I realized that was a lot of time walking back and forth. So then I'd get the Venti, 20 ounces, and I'd order black tea. And you can refill that as many times as you want on the same visit. But then, something you guys already know, you can get even more bang for your buck if you get it without ice, right? Because ice takes up, and it's already cold drink, right? Come on, you guys like to save some money? You like a hack, a shortcut? You get it without ice, and now they fill it up. But here's the big one that I didn't know, and then I learned it. Starbucks black tea comes from concentrate. So they mix that 50-50 concentrate with water. So now I would order a Venti, no ice, no water. And ladies and gentlemen, that's 20 ounces of pure jet fuel that they're giving you free refills on. And at that point, on my same visit, I am absolutely levitating by the table in the back. But to get them one more time, I would also get my last refill as I left for the day, and I would take it home and put it in the fridge. And then I have jet fuel all week that I could water down if I wanted to, and then I would do the same thing the next day. And I am still alive. Heart palpitations are slowly coming back into an acceptable range. But today we're going to look at a passage of Scripture in which a religious person looks for a spiritual shortcut, a spiritual hack, a loophole that maybe I can get something for less. And maybe I don't have to do it all the way that it should be done. And maybe I can just kind of be a little more efficient with my faith. Matthew 22, Matthew 22, starting in verse 34. Perhaps many of you you're going to be familiar with. But here we have, I'll just dive in and read it for us, and then we'll kind of walk through it together. Here it says, hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees were a group of religious leaders, as were the Pharisees. Hearing that he had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Now, before I go on, I simply say this is kind of like, and I'm not the only person who have mentioned this. I saw this in my study this week on in some different commentaries, that there was a tradition among some rabbis at the time to try to boil down the faith to its bare minimum, to try to be able, perhaps, to be able to do one thing instead of do everything. And if we can just get it down and make it simple, because faith is not simple. Faith is expansive. And for the first century, these religious Jewish groups, they followed, to the best of their ability, the law. What is the greatest commandment in the law? Well, he's referring not to a legislative law. He's referring to the law that came from Moses. All of the first 5 books of the Bible is kind of what he's referring to there. It's expansive, and through different traditions, they would say, depending on how you interpret it, there's 613 laws within the law. 613 things you have to do or not to do. 248 of those are positive, 365 are negative. 248 you have to do's, and 365 do not do's. And there's some commentarians who would say that there's an intent here to try to find a shortcut in faith, to try to be able to please God, not by carrying out living obediently to 613 laws, but if he could identify the magic law, the silver bullet, the most important one, that maybe by doing one, he wouldn't have to worry about all of them. And it's not necessarily trying to get out of it or do something wrong, but he's trying to do more by doing less. As if, I know I'm not going to do well. If you give me a test of 613 questions, I'm not going to get 100%. There's no way. And so I'm bound to be less than perfect, which is failure. But if we could say what's the one law that is the most important, perhaps what he's trying to do is saying, if I know I can't get it, I can't ace that test, but if there's one law, maybe I can ace that test. And then I'll be able to stand before God and say, I did the one thing that was the most important. And he's looking for a hack. He's looking for something. And he's looking to do that by testing Jesus in this moment. Here's how Jesus replies. Continue on, verse 37. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. Right there, he answers the question succinctly and directly. Hey, teacher, Jesus, what's the most important command? I got you, man. It's this: love the Lord your God. And everybody in the room, wherever they're at, they probably would have nodded, because he's not saying anything they didn't already know at this point. He's actually referring to something from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4. This is from the law of Moses. It was known as the Shema, or the Shema Israel. And it was something that faithful Jews said every morning and every evening. So when they said, hey, what's the greatest commandment? They knew probably what he was going to say. And this is one of the rabbinical traditions that is the most important. They would say it every morning and every evening. It was an outward expression that people could see. They could measure. Either you did or you did not say this and fulfill this commandment each day. But it wasn't just recited, it was also worn and displayed. Let me say, how can a verse be worn and displayed? Well, there was something, and if you want to look this one up, it's Deuteronomy 6 through 9. There's bonus homework if you want to take a look at it. But there's something called a phylactery, Phylactery, and it was a tiny leather box that would be worn on the head. I have a picture of one for you here. This is some modern Jewish men who are wearing phylacteries on their forehead. Why would it say that? Well, there's this verse in Deuteronomy 6 where the reader is encouraged to impress God's word upon your head. And we might read that and go, yeah, that's metaphor, right? It means to think about it regularly. Well, you could also interpret this much more literally, which is what the Sadducees and the Pharisees did, and Orthodox Jews, some do today. So they would wear this tiny box on their head, and inside that box is a scrap of paper or parchment containing Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. The most important profession of faith for any Jewish man or woman. Now, not only would they recite it in the morning and the evening, not only would they wear it, they would also adorn their homes with it. There's another small box called a mezuzah. A mezuzah. You want to say that one with me? That's a fun one. Say mezuzah. Mezuzah. That is a mezuzah on the outside of a door frame right there heading into a home. It's a small box. Perhaps you've seen one of these before in someone's home. Sometimes they're inside, but they're usually on a door frame or above a door frame. And inside of that tiny box, you can slide it open, and there's a scrap of paper or a piece of parchment. And on that piece of paper is printed Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And so Jesus is saying, what's the greatest commandment? It's the Shema. It's to recite this verse. It's to wear this verse. It's to adorn your home, the walls of your home with this verse. Church, it is a visible, all of these things, what they have in common, they are visible and measurable vertical expressions of our love for God. They are visible in that you can see or you can hear, so you can see someone praying and saying the Shema. You can see someone wearing the phylactery. You can go to their home and look at the mezuzah that is up on the wall. They're all visible and they're measurable. Either you have one in your house or you don't. Either you have it on your head or often on a wrist, or you do not. Either you said the Shema once or twice. You wouldn't say it more, but perhaps you could say it less. So it's visible, it's measurable, and it's vertical. It's between the person and God. We have similar things. Now, we don't wear them literally on our head, wrist. Maybe you have framed things hanging up in your house, Bible verses here or there. Maybe you have a tattoo of a verse that's significant to you. But there are similar things that we have today that are visible, measurable expressions of our vertical praise and worship to God. Lifeway Research did a study, and they asked the question, and this is specifically of evangelical Christians, of which our church could be described by that. And they said, what does it mean to be a Christian? And they're kind of answering the question, what things do we do? Now, what does it mean to be a faithful Jew in the first century? Well, some of the things involve saying the Shema twice a day, wearing a phylactery, putting up a mezuzah. There are things that you can point to and say, that is what it looks like to be a faithful Jew. Well, what does it look like for us? Well, we have our own visible, measurable, vertical expressions of faith. You and I need to pray, right? You can see if you pray, someone's head is bowed, maybe their hands are like this, having some quiet time in the morning, evening, maybe at lunch. We read the Bible. This is another one for us. We attend worship services. You get a star for that today. Those are the first three as the results from this survey. In addition, they said be honest, forgive, and dress modestly, something that only came up in the evangelical tradition, and there's a whole history for that. And all these things can be good. These are good. Just like for these faithful Jewish men and women, it was good to say the Shema and pray on a regular basis. It was good to emphasize this belief by wearing it and having it visible at different times. And it was good to adorn their home with this reminder. And it's good for us to pray and read the Bible and be at church. The limitation, though, is that all of these things, in one way or another, can become inward focused. My Bible reading, my prayer time, my devotional, my church, my Sunday morning, me. And if they're still about us and God, we're missing something. We're missing something. If Jesus had stopped with the passage we already read, we would not know what it is missing. We would just go on and on with this vertical expression. Here's the things that we can do that make us good Christians. But he keeps going in verse 39. Now, when he said that first answer, love the Lord your God with your heart, with your soul, with all your mind, they probably thought he was done because they ask, what's the greatest commandment? Looking for a singular answer. And he just gave them one answer. And so maybe the crowd was breaking up. Maybe people begin to kind of move away. But then he starts talking again and he says, And the second is like it. Whoa, we got attention again here. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. Now, this would have caught the people off guard, because while they were familiar with these verses that he's quoting, no rabbi that we have any history of in any writing has ever associated those two commands together until this moment. When he said, love the Lord your God, he was quoting Deuteronomy 6, verse 4, and here he's referring to Leviticus 19:18. It says, do not seek, again, part of the law of Moses, which says, do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. When you hear this phrase, love your neighbor as yourself, a lot of people think, oh, that's New Testament Jesus. That's New Testament God. Old Testament was like a little bit angry, like don't cross the Old Testament God. We like the new Jesus a little bit better, the one that's talking about love and forgiveness. And some people don't realize that to love your neighbor as yourself is not exclusive to the New Testament. It is not exclusive at all. In fact, it's an Old Testament timeless principle that Jesus reaffirmed in a new light in the New Testament, because God does not change. This has always been the standard. And not only does he say, love God, and now love your neighbor, but he says, all the law and the prophets hang on these two commands. He's insinuating that if you can follow these two, the other 600 plus will take care of themselves. I'll give you one example of that is the 10 Commandments. We did a series not long ago about Exodus, and you get in Exodus chapter 20, and we find Moses coming down to the people, and he comes with these tablets with 10 commands that God has given him to set the foundation for how these people are going to live post-slavery in Egypt. And in Exodus 20, we have these 10 commands. The first 4 are vertical. They have a vertical impact, meaning between humankind and God. Here are the first 4. Have no other gods before me. Have no idols. Do not worship idols. No taking God's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath as something holy unto the Lord. Love God, love neighbor. These first 4 are extrapolations or implications of what it looks like to love God, right? Our vertical relationship with God matters. Jesus never says otherwise. He affirms it. But he doesn't leave it there. He goes on and he says, and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, jump back to Exodus 20. I know plenty of you are familiar with these, but here are the next, the remaining 6 commands. Honor your parents. Do not commit murder. Do not commit adultery. Do not steal. Do not lie. Do not covet anything that another person owns. Where the first 4 are about our relationship, God, vertical. These 6 are about our relationship with who? Everybody else. Down here, horizontal impact right here. The first, we have visible, measurable, vertical expressions of faith. And here Jesus says, and there's something else as well. There's another side to this coin. There's also something that we have to do or not do in relationship to the people around us. And why is that? Are these just arbitrary rules? No, not at all. Because things like stealing, if I steal, who am I stealing from? Another human. And so that means I'm taking something from someone and hurting them by that. And he's saying, no, how we live horizontally matters. We can't just be vertically concerned. But by tying these two commands together, he says the inverse is also true. We can't be people who are so concerned with one another that we live with kindness towards the people around us, and we want to do good, and we're so focused myopically on social justice or this movement or this cause. None of that is bad. But he says you can't separate it from loving God. When we love God, we have to remember to love others. And if loving others comes more naturally, we have to always still prioritize loving God. This is the most great commandment, the greatest commandment. And Jesus makes it clear that this is the thing that the rest of us, all of us today, are called to devote the rest of our lives to pursue. If you're here today and you've been a Christian a long time, this is your calling. If you're here today and you're not yet a Christian, you're not a believer, you're curious about faith, well, here's what you're getting into. Figure out How will you love God and love your neighbor as yourself? Because when we don't, we drift inward. We drift into it's my relationship with God, my plan, my prayers, my. Most of us don't have a problem with selfishness. We learn early on in life, after maybe a first word being mom or dad, mine is usually a pretty close second or third or fourth. We know what it is to take care of ourselves. And if you think you're the exception to that, I would challenge you sometime today, maybe before you leave, is to take a group photo. Take a group photo with 5, 6, 10 people. And then when they show you the photo to see if everyone likes it, you tell me, who do you look at first? We all look at ourselves. You don't care what anybody else looks like. You don't care if everybody else's eyes are closed. If you look good, that's the one that needs to get posted. We drift towards self naturally. We don't have to be told that. This was the issue the Sadducees and the Pharisees struggled with. Self, their relationship with God. Am I doing it right? Do I have the shortcut to faith to please God? And this second half of the command was not given the attention it needed. In this series we're in, Abundantly Beyond, the hope today is that we can move abundantly beyond self. Now, not to leave it behind, because you matter. Your faith matters. Your prayer life matters. Your reading of the Bible matters. The way you serve and treat people matters. Your self matters. We're not leaving self behind, but we are moving beyond just thinking about ourselves so that we can more fully embrace the second half of this verse, to love our neighbors. See, for Jesus, one's love for God was only as strong as their love for their neighbors. And this love that we talk about, we always need to talk about terms. It's not the emotional love. It's not butterflies when you see the person that, walks into the room and you're excited and I hope they talk to me, that like puppy love, this romantic. No. This word for love, you might be familiar, is called agape love. And agape is intentional love. It's preferential love. It's undeserved love where someone, not through an emotional attachment, but through action, chooses to prioritize the betterment of another human being. Or in this case, God for us, because we read that for God so loved that he, anyone? Gave. Action-oriented. And we're thankful for that God didn't just think fondly about us and then leave us to create hell on this earth and experience it in the next. No. He loved us so much, he was moved to action and gave his son. Love has to be practical, it has to be useful, it has to be beneficial to the person that we're supposed to love. In this case, our neighbors. If I could sum up our entire message today, I jotted it down, I'll put it on the screen, but maybe this is something you can wrestle with this week as I've been wrestling with it this week. Love for God is not an emotional connection with a distant deity, but the here and now responsibility to bless, protect, and serve the neighbor standing before you. I'll leave that up for a moment just for us to think about, to wrestle with. That when we say we love God, it's not about an emotional connection or like, yeah, I'm good with the big man upstairs, we're cool. Like, no. Love has to resolve itself in action towards others. That visible, vertical way that we express our love to God is not the end. It's the first half. It's the first side of the coin. It must then flesh itself out in love, in action towards the other people that God has put around us. We have to love our neighbors. Now, love for neighbor, where I said before things are visible, it's easy to tell. Have you said the Shema today? Have you worn the verse on your head? Is it posted? Loving your neighbor is a little bit less visible. And so I could ask you, do you love your neighbor? And you would probably all nod and say yes. But because it's less verifiable and less visible, you know how I could get a much better answer of whether or not you love your neighbor? I don't care what you think. I need to go talk to your neighbor. I need to go to your neighbor, no, not that one, the other one, and ask them, hey, do you think Nancy loves you? Your neighbor Nancy, does she love you? Not like, butterflies, but like, do your neighbors love you? Do they care about you? Is your life better because you live next to Seth? You ever have a neighbor move away and you want to throw a party? We want the opposite to be true for us. If you move, I hope your neighbors grieve it. Why? Because you made their lives better. That you weren't the neighbor. What he's not telling us to do is be neutral to our neighbors, right? Just don't cause problems. Respect the property lines. Grass, mow yours, not theirs. Keep your end of the bargain. They'll keep theirs. Don't ask too many questions. It's kind of like, hey, how you doing? Good? Yeah. Weather, huh? Crazy, right? All right. See ya. And you respect it. That's as far as we go. They do their stuff. We do ours. No, Jesus is not saying to be neutral. He says, no, you need to love your neighbors. You and I, all of our neighbors. And this goes beyond where you live, your residence, right? It's who's your neighbor at school, in the locker next to yours, and the neighbor two lockers down, or the teacher you interact with in third period, the administrator who you've bumped up against, the coach, the employer or the employee you interact with on a regular basis. What about that neighbor? Are they blessed because you are in their life? When we only focus on the front half, loving God, we can get so inward focused that we forget that we're called to be light and to be salt and to be goodness, to reflect Christ into the lives of others. We only love God to the degree which we love our neighbors. This used to be very, very standard. Today, it's not so much. If you want to ask someone, are you a Christian? Well, how do I know if you're a Christian? Well, I read the Bible. I go to church this many times. I do this. I give money, blah, blah, blah. These things are fine. Those are expressions of our love for God. But in the early life of the church, the first few hundred years after the resurrection, things were very different because they didn't have Bibles to read. They didn't have churches like this to go to. So how could they be known? Well, let me give you 3 quotes from history. The first is from AD 120-ish from the Greek writer Lucian, talking about the early church in a work of literature. We read, he wrote that it is incredible to see the fervor with which the people of that religion help each other in their wants. They spare nothing. Their first legislator, he's referring to Jesus here, has put it in their heads that they are all brethren. This is an outsider looking in and saying, this is interesting. They have fervor, excitement, and joy to help each other. They must be Christians. Later, a few decades later, the church father Tertullian, now this is an insider talking about the Christians. He says, it is our care for the helpless. It is our practice of loving kindness that brands us in the eyes of many of our opponents. Look, they say, how they love each other. Look how they are prepared to die for one another. So Tertullian is talking about non-believers looking into the church, and he says, they don't know what to make of these Christians. Because for the first decades, 100 years after, Christians, well, not a lot has changed. Christians are weirdos, right? And in the first century, they were big-time weirdos because rumors, there's no social media, so people would play telephone about this new group, this new cult, this new religion. I'm not sure what it is, but what do you know about them? Well, they gathered on Sundays. Don't the Jews gather on Saturdays? They do, so that's suspicious. Why would they gather on a Sunday? They believe that their leader was killed and rose again. Now we're talking zombie fiction. That's kind of weird. And then when they gather, they eat someone's body and drink someone's blood. Now we're talking cannibalism. I'm serious. These were the rumors. This is part of why the persecution for the Christians began. And then they had this practice of calling everyone brethren, brother, sister. And so you know what rumor came out of that? That they were, not only did they have a zombie leader, not only were they cannibalistic, but they were incestuous zombie cannibals. Hopefully we're doing a little better. Hopefully we're known around Kendallville a little bit better than that. But people began to persecute and began to make their lives very difficult. And yet, Tertullian notes that they look at them and they say, but how they love each other. How they are prepared to die for one another. Those people, those must be Christians. One more. Now, this one is from someone who was antagonistic to the gospel, Julian the Apostate, someone who's left the faith. He was the last Roman emperor of the Constantine dynasty, the AD 330s. This is good. He says nothing. Now, what he was trying to do, he was trying to establish social services in the Roman realm. He was trying to establish things so that his impact on society and culture and history would be one of making everyone's lives better. And when he went out to create these social services and opportunities for people coming through, he notes this. He says, nothing has so much contributed to the progress of the superstition of Christians as their charity to strangers. The impious Galileans, he's referring to Christians there, they provide not only for their own, but also for ours. They must be Christians. When people think about Fairview Fellowship Church, they go, yeah, that's the group of people who gather by the Applebee's. The roof was green and now it's blue. And I don't know. That's all I know about them. I can tell you this. Your neighbor, I don't know your neighbors, but I'll tell you this. Your neighbors don't care that you're here right now. Your neighbors do not care that you go to church. Your neighbors don't care that you have a devotional plan. Your neighbors don't care that you pray. Your neighbors do not care if you memorize a Bible verse or give some money to church. That will not impact their lives. You should still do those things, but what impacts your neighbors is when you and I love our neighbors with action. How did the first church and earliest Christians express their love for God? With radical love for their neighbors. The neighbors they liked, the neighbors they didn't like, the neighbors they didn't yet know, strangers passing through the land, those with different political views, which was everyone at the time. Christians were the outsiders looking in who didn't really have a political dog in the fight, and because of that, they became easy pickings. And they loved. And the world was transformed, not because they legislated laws into culture, not because they ran for office and dictated what everybody else would do. The world was changed beginning in the first century, but actually having begun years and years and years before, is that Christians, people following Jesus, chose to love with extravagance. In high school, I, for a while, really loved the idea of apologetics. Maybe you've studied apologetics, a book like The Case for Christ by Lee Strobel. Talks about how can you defend the faith? How can I talk to someone else about a God that I can't even see? How can I defend his existence or my faith in a God like that? Apologetics gives you a logical, well thought of way to give an answer for the hope that you have. They're a good thing. And yet, I would argue that if you can out-debate anyone, you can prove as much as you can the existence of God or make logical sense of this thing that we call faith and say, here's why you can believe in the resurrection and the historicity of the early church and the Gospels are reliable. You can argue all these things, and you can. Apologetics would do that, but you don't love, what do they say? Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a worldly way to say, church, we got to lead with love, out of our love for God. John, I know we're going to close in a song. You guys can come on up, but church, I want to leave you with this challenge that we need to love God, and I pray that you're doing a good job of that. That's new to you. Maybe you're here today, you're curious. What does it look like? Man, it's simply to take a step. James 4:8 says that if you will draw close or come close to God, he will come close to you. What a beautiful promise. Draw close to Jesus, and he'll draw close to you. Take a step towards him. That can be your first step towards love for God. That vertical sign of faith. And yet, if we stop there, we've missed everything. If you have a recipe in front of you and you choose to use half of the ingredients, it doesn't matter what you're cooking, it's going in the trash. It is a pass-fail. A recipe is pass-fail. You need 100% of the ingredients, not 50%. This is similar. If we get half of this right and we love God really, really well, but we never let that love overflow into the lives of our neighbors, we missed it. We missed it. God, forgive us when we miss that, when we get so caught up with the visible outward signs, our vertical relationship with God, that we forget that we're here on earth with real neighbors, with real needs, who might be very curious about our faith or might not yet be. But we have an opportunity to love our neighbor out of our love for God. Love God, love others, Well, church, we love God by loving others. Let me close in prayer and challenge us with this thought today. Jesus, thank you for the opportunity to grow, to go beyond, that you love us enough that you call us to be more, to call us beyond, to grow and develop and not remain stuck in our habits and our patterns and our ways, but that we would be people who are changed by you so that our lives begin to look different. We grow in righteousness and holiness, and also, God, we overflow into the lives of our neighbors. We become curious about the hard things that they're going through, and we come up with ways to bless and encourage them, maybe practically, that our God, would our neighbors realize that they are loved by their Heavenly Father because they've first seen that love in their neighbor, at work, at school, on the cul-de-sac, wherever it would be. Help us to be people that love you well, and the most natural expression of that love for you would be love for those around us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.